Hey, if you're a Pink Floyd fan and specifically of Dark Side of the Moon, I think you'll kind of enjoy this. And the question for today's video is, what does it all mean? And the reason I'm doing this video is I was looking for some articles and things on Pink Floyd from some old newspapers. And I found this article from March 21st, 1973. And what this guy was actually doing a review on Dark Side of the Moon, which had just come out. But he actually kind of dives in just for a second on what he thinks the album means. What's the overall... Because one of the things about Dark Side of the Moon, and it's obviously lost today, but it really is a great example of an album that you really should, if you can, sit down and take the whole thing in. Now, you can sit and listen to all the different pieces. Each piece stands on its own for sure. But, the way it all runs together, the way each song goes, the tempo, the tension, the whole thing, it's so great. It's to me, I think it's just one of the great albums. And this guy that wrote this article, he's kind of doing a review on the album, jumps in a little bit to what he thinks it's all about. And so I want to read this to you and then get your feedback, leave it down in the notes, what you think about his assessment of what this is all about and any other feedback you have about this. So this was from the Berwyn Life, Wednesday, March 21st, 1973, page 14. And it's called Pink Floyd Has a Hit by Steve Sparacio. Okay. Like the Moody Blues, the music of Pink Floyd is lush and rich. It is very sophisticated. It is a very sophisticated type of sound. The group's new release, Dark Side of the Moon, is without doubt the best album I have heard this year. As with any top-notch album, it takes a while to really get into it and interpret it. While I'm still not prepared to put forth a final interpretation, it does seem the Dark Side of the Moon is concerned with the concept of insanity. One thing for sure, it is an album based on a theme. One can tell merely by listening to how well the cuts are arranged that this is a thematic album. That's what I was saying a second ago, that it really ebbs and flows and it takes you on a journey as you listen to it. So it is a great example because we've talked about this in other videos. That is a lost art. When you used to get together with people and you just sit down and listen to an album, because that album was organized like this specifically to be presented that way. And we've kind of lost that. When you started moving into the 80s and you had all these bands, it became kind of a formula. Okay, put a hit song on this place, put the first song on the second side needs to be this. And anyway, this was more really well thought out and wanted to be presented as a work of art. Okay, let's see here. The exact theme is open to interpretation. My feeling is that Pink Floyd is proposing that traditional society is not rational or sane, and therefore it is unjustified for society to label any person as insane. Speak to Me starts the LP out on a slow, surrealistic note. The group continues this style with the next cut, Breathe. Oh my gosh. Roger Waters' voice. David Gilmour. David Gilmour's voice is so spectacular in that song. Anyway, I absolutely love that. All That You Touch and... let's see here. The Speak to Me starts the two lines from Breathe. And all you touch and all you are is all your life will ever be. Seems to be, in terms of Pink Floyd beliefs, a universal truism. On the Run is strikingly similar to some of the electronic music produced today. It gives the effect of a man hurriedly fleeing from traditional society. And by the way, On the Run, what they do with the Moog synthesizers and oh man, so cool. Time, that's the next song, starts with ring bells, but quickly gets down to the purest rock you'll find on the album. And if you've never listened to the beginning of that song, the chimes in really good speakers or in really good headphones, you owe it to yourself. That was produced and recorded so well. When the chimes start going off, man, it is so great. And then gung, 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 gung. I mean, it is sonically amazing. And by the way, the person that produced it was Alan Parsons. This was probably in his career, probably his masterpiece, producing this. So much of that they owe to Alan Parsons. Okay, the accomplished lead, let's see. David Gilmour's lead guitar is absolutely fascinating. It's one of the most distinctive and accomplished leads that you'll ever have the pleasure of hearing. And that is generally true with David Gilmour. Okay, let's see here. The transition from Time to The Great Gig in the Sky consists of a repetitious piano that is soon joined by other instruments, and in turn by Claire Torrey's breathtakingly beautiful, soulful vocals. Yeah, that's right. Her soprano, the way she sings in there is really, really cool. Her soprano voice gives the cut its eerie, spacey feeling. Yeah, and as they wrap up first side of that album, and she's doing all that, it's really, really interesting. Side 2 begins with the sound of money. Cash registers clicking, which in turn leads to the song Money. And that's the one that kind of, so I'm too young to have lived when this stuff, or been aware when this stuff was happening, when this was becoming popular. I was I knew how to walk at that point, but I wasn't aware of any of this stuff. And the song Money was probably the first song that I ever became aware of that was Pink Floyd, because that was kind of a hit in a way, which is pretty interesting because when you consider it's kind of a blues riff, but it's in 7 time. Dun 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 dun. 1, 2. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's so unusual to have that kind of thing. And Soundgarden and bands like that it did a lot of things with weird time signatures, and other bands did too. But that was so interesting that a song that was in 7/4 time got that became a hit like that. And then when it goes into the solo, it jumps into 4/4 when Gilmour starts. It's really cool. Okay, anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that. It is a continuation of the indictment Pink Floyd makes against the various insanities of traditional society. After Money, Pink Floyd makes the transition to Us and Them, a musically rich cut. And again, David Gilmour's voice is so good in that song. It's got multiple echoes, great harmony, and sax accompaniment. And I actually, when I was younger, I hated the saxophone, but I loved it. I loved it in there. It was so good, which gives the cut both a jazzy and haunting sound. Okay, the last 2 cuts, Brain Damage and Eclipse, are inseparable, true, and perhaps the crux of the whole album. After arguing that society is insane, Pink Floyd on Brain Damage/Eclipse claim that society has no right to pass judgments of lunacy on anyone. This may seem like a preposterous assumption at first, but consider that society does tend to consider the nonconformist as a lunatic. And of course, that's the word that gets used in that song. Let's see here. Some of our greatest inventors and innovators were considered lunatics in their own time. Anyway, Roger Waters' lyrics on Brain Damage /Eclipse are magnificent. Eclipse is especially good with its poetic, all that you touch, all that you see, all that you taste, all that you feel passages. Musically, these 2 cuts are the 2 most interesting things on the LP, and alone are worth more than the price of the album. The interpretation I have put forth concerning Dark Side of the Moon may or may not be correct. It's not important to determine whether it is or not, because in the end, Dark Side of the Moon is such a compelling album that each person will be able to interpret it in his own way. And no matter what that interpretation is, because of the perfect lyrical and musical structure, one will be able to enjoy the album on its own merits. That's the mark of a really great album. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to that, and I'd really love to get your feedback. What do you think of his interpretation of this? And did you ever have your own interpretation as you're listening to that stuff? When I first heard Dark Side of the Moon, it was right after I got my my first CD player, like in the early 80s somewhere, and I knew that I had to, that was like the CD to get, because it was just so kind of considered this perfection. And I'd heard little bits and pieces of it, but I remember putting it in. And I was, maybe as an early teen, I wasn't so focused on what's the overall message, but I did get arrested by all the music and all the different things. And I do remember the line, I remember the song Time. And for some reason, even as a young teenage kid, how the opening line hit me so hard. Ticking away the moments that make up a dull day. You fritter and waste the hours in an offhand way. And for some reason, that line has stuck with me all these years. Just this whole concept of time and wasting it. You know, how short life is. And I don't know why, but as a young teenager, I heard that line and it just resonated with me so much. And still here I am, you know, middle-aged man. And to this day, that line still resonates with me. Anyway, please follow the channel, like the video, and as I said, share your thoughts on what you thought about this album, what you thought perhaps the meaning was to it, and what did, because a lot of you that watch this channel are, you know, around my age too, and if you were too young to kind of get the overall concept at the time, what grabbed you? Did you have something like that I did as a young man? Just that line off that album that for some reason it just reached out and it just got me. Hey, anyway, with that, have yourself a fantastic day.